Okay, it's going to take just a second to pop up over here. And I'll let you know as soon as it does. For those watching this after the fact, sorry, it takes a second to kick in sometimes. Looks like we have 4 people in queue. Thanks for joining us, everybody. We'll be live in just a second. And there we go. Cool. All right. Well, hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. My name is Ben Jackson. For those of you who haven't joined us before, who haven't listened to some of our podcasts, things like that, or have just been living under a rock, who comes to this channel and doesn't know who I am at this point. But I'm one of the co-founders of Upsolve. And if you're here, you're probably wondering what life looks like after bankruptcy and how you can rebuild your finances. I know firsthand, like, it can be super overwhelming both to be in debt, but then even more so when you get out of debt to say, like, well, what now? Like, how do I, build my credit up? How do I make sure that I do that in a smart way that doesn't put me back in debt? And how do I make sure that I keep myself out of debt in the future and can kind of like boost my earnings and income and savings, things like that? It's a fresh start, right? And when you start fresh, it can be a little scary. And that is why we're here today. We want to give you some context, give you some support and ideas and confidence to move forward in your post-bankruptcy journey, which is why I am thrilled to introduce tonight's guest, Melissa Ingersoll. Melissa is a support specialist at Upsolve, and she brings an incredible wealth of experience from the U.S. Bankruptcy Court and the District Courts for the Northern District of New York. She's also helped manage case filings there, assisted clients, and supported courtroom operations beyond that. But even more importantly, and important to me, and I'm sure important to our audience as well, Melissa has a deeply personal connection to bankruptcy because she's been through it herself. And she's also rebuilt her financial situation to the point where we were just talking before this call. The room that you see her in is a home that she owns. I know a lot of times we talk about, can you actually, have a home post-bankruptcy? Yes, Melissa does. I do. Super excited for her to be able to share her story tonight. So Melissa, welcome.
Hi, Ben. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Glad you're here. And before we dive in, can you share a little bit about your own experiences and what led you to become an advocate for others navigating this bankruptcy process?
Absolutely. So my journey into bankruptcy support began with my own difficult experience. In 2008, my husband and I were living the American dream, buying our dream house, and his business was thriving. In 2009, the recession hit, and it hit us hard. His business was greatly affected, and we discovered that our new home we had just purchased was built on a series of sinkholes, drastically reducing its value. That's something that only happens in Florida, guys.
Yeah.
We were forced to supplement our income with credit to survive. And by 2016, we were overwhelmed with debt. We had an asset that was no longer worth what we had a mortgage on, it for, and basically facing financial ruin. We were unable to afford an attorney.
Wow.
And I navigated the Chapter 7 bankruptcy process myself, relying on my experience with legal documents and court processes. That firsthand struggle. I understand the complexities and the emotional toll, the passion that it ignites in people facing similar circumstances. And I realize how overwhelming and isolating it can be. So I focused, my energies on becoming a resource for those who feel lost and alone in the bankruptcy system, and just reassuring them that you can get through this, you can do it.
I love that. So you were a bankruptcy expert, really, compared to most people, and you still kind of found it difficult. What's that all about?
So when I filed, I wasn't a bankruptcy expert.
Okay,
I worked in the courts, but I didn't work in the bankruptcy court.
Sure.
I just understood legal documents.
Gotcha. You're one of like 4 people in the world who understand legal documents.
Exactly. So it just, it was definitely daunting and overwhelming for sure. But, and it took me a long time. I mean, I'm not going to say that I did it quickly. It took me a long time to work through the process.
I feel like we need to have like a competition for who took the longest to file bankruptcy. How long did it end up taking you?
It was probably 2 or 3 months.
Okay. Well, you beat me. I took like 6 months because I kept doing it wrong, and I'm impressed. You have my respect.
Oh, well, I feel like maybe I had a leg up. I don't know, but
yeah. I mean, you go into court and you like look at this stuff. You're like, what even are these words? Like, I don't know what this is.
Secured, unsecured,
Yeah,
priority,
exactly.
non-priority, very scary, right? Who knows what
Hmm.
those mean?
Well, you've obviously like worked really closely with bankruptcy petitions in general, both before Upsolve and also at Upsolve. What are some of the most common mistakes you see people make when filing? And is that different when people are working on their own versus with Upsolve?
So, to be perfectly honest, no. I think that I've
Mm,
seen even within the bankruptcy court too, like just working with Upsolve users and on our platform, it's very similar issues. And I would say that the most common thing and my biggest piece of advice is be thorough, be accurate,
mm,
and be honest.
mm,
So people oftentimes think like, I want to keep my car, so I'm just, not going to put it within the bankruptcy paperwork,
oh,
or
interesting.
yeah, or like I have the small debt that probably isn't of a concern or various things, but it is important to have a clear and accurate portrait of your whole financial history and where you are right now. Um, and it just benefits you for that fresh start. It's just really
Mhm.
important to make sure that everything and you don't want to miss anything that you potentially would have discharged.
Mm, okay.
Um,
So leaving things off, it sounds like leaving things off in the attempt to hide them, or is it just kind of generally they don't know what they should put on?
no, I think that I don't think it's attempt to hide it. I think
Mm,
oftentimes people have debts that maybe they walked away from. Maybe it
mm,
took them a while to get to a place where they were actually going to file bankruptcy and they've been in financial distress for quite some time
mm,
and they've just had charge-offs or they've just,
okay.
left things behind and you just want to make sure that those are things that you gather up when you go about filing bankruptcy to make sure that you include them in your filing and it's very common. It's very common.
What are there other mistakes you see people make other than like not reporting the right things or not having the right documents?
I think that sometimes people have difficulties accurately depicting their income.
Mm,
If someone is a sole
mm,
proprietor or they have their own business, things like that, you just want to make sure that you have business records that you can show the trustee at your 341 meeting, like that you can indicate where these things came from. And business ownership can be a little bit difficult when it comes to income regarding that.
gotcha. So it's like what percentage of my income came from this? What percentage of it even counts? Does all of your income count in a bankruptcy application?
All of your income will count.
Okay,
Yes. Yeah.
interesting.
So you just wanna make sure that you're as accurate and as thorough as you can be.
Gotcha. Was that something you personally had trouble with when you filled out your forms? I know I did because I was like a contractor for like 8 different like rideshare companies and delivery. I was like, I don't know what's income and what's not. Was that like that for you?
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
my husband was self-employed, so yeah, we definitely had to make sure that we had all of our tax returns and everything and, business information and, things like that to get to the trustee, but it's a little bit more complex than if you're just like a W-2 employee. It's much
Okay.
easier.
Interesting. So get your stuff together ahead of time. How do you know what the heck stuff you actually need and what you should report?
So if you the Upsolve tool walks you right through everything you're going to need, asks you really down to earth questions, and it's TurboTax for bankruptcy,
Ooh.
so the questions are really um, common language questions. So it's not like looking at the petition once you complete um, the tool in Upsolve and you get your petition. When you look at the papers, they're very confusing um, but we're going to ask you and obtain the information in just very common sense questions.
Cool. That I feel like common sense is incompatible with most legal processes. It's nice to
It's
see.
it's hard to come by for sure.
So I know there's, and for those watching, you might not know this. Can you walk us through what happens in sort of like a user's experience with the bankruptcy tool? Like, what does it look like at the start? What does it look like at the end? I know I have the screener up here on the screen. Walk me
Mhm.
through what happens after I do this.
So once you get through the screener and it's going to indicate, you qualify for our services and, possibly chapter 7 bankruptcy is a good option for
Mhm.
you, then it's just going to systematically walk you through gathering the information you would need for your petition. So it's going to start with like an about you section.
Mm.
So it's looking for your legal name, your address, various things like that. And from there, it just moves through what what assets do you have? Do you have a vehicle? Do you have this? Do you have
Okay.
that? Right? What's your income? What's and it walks you through things in a certain way. So it's going to ask your past income first. Then it's going to ask what are your expenses? What are you spending
Okay.
money on now? Then it's going to ask your debtors and creditors. And then it's going to follow up with like, what do you think your income's going to look like after you file?
Okay.
What are
Got it.
your expenses going to be after you file?
So I answer all these questions. Obviously, you are providing support for this process. What is your involvement in this process?
So myself and other members of my team can be we can be contacted like through the help desk. So there's help at upsolve.org. It's an email address. And if you get stuck on something or you have a question about the tool or the information you need to provide, you can always send us an email. We're fairly responsive. Additionally,
I would
once
say
you've
very, very responsive. She's being modest, folks.
okay, we're very, very responsive. um, And then once you get to the point where you've completed the tool and you're to the point where you're ready to generate your packet, our team also does a review process and just looks
Okay.
over your information.
So you're looking at forms to make sure, there's no like real red flags that would potentially raise a concern for my
Right,
application. Okay.
right. Anything obviously, a, a, a typo in, transposed number, anything pretty obvious is what we're looking for.
Gotcha. So I go through this with you. We make sure there's no red flags. Then what happens?
So then once we've completed the review, we'll release it back to you. You can download and create your bankruptcy packet. The nice thing about Upsolve is it gives you some sheets in between where it gives you a little bit of information about what these forms mean and what you're
Mm,
going to do with
cool.
them. So it'll indicate where you need to sign, things that you may need to keep for your trustee, and things that are going to be filed with the bankruptcy court, how many copies you may need, various things like that.
Cool.
Um, and then you're going to locate your local court and you're going to go file your bankruptcy case and get your fresh
Yeah.
start.
Nice. And get out of debt, which now, we're 12 minutes in, folks. You knew we were going to get here eventually. I just wanted Melissa to share those insider tips. Now brings us to the point that we're really here to talk about, which is we filed a bankruptcy. It worked. Woohoo. No more debt. How good does that feel,
Right?
Melissa?
It's a wonderful feeling. It's scary, then great.
So now we're at the well, what the heck do I do next phase. So, what happens to your finances as soon as you file bankruptcy? As soon as you get that discharge, you're ready to go. What next? What should you focus on?
um, so like what I chose to do and what I think is probably the best thing for people to do is you really should create a budget.
Mm,
It's really essential. Now I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm some budgeting expert because by no means am I.
yeah.
But a budget would just be a plan and outline, just a clear understanding and establishing your income, your expenses, whether that's on a weekly or monthly basis. You know, how much money you're bringing in, how much money you're putting out, what are your
Okay.
necessities? You want to make sure your housing, your food, your utilities are covered, you know. And in a budget, you can still have a fun money category, right? Like
Ooh,
you don't want to
yeah.
deprive
There we
yourself.
go.
So sit down and look at what you have coming in, make sure that what you need to cover is covered.
Are there any budgeting resources you suggest? I mean, like, I know I didn't learn much about budgeting in school, which is unfortunate. And like, I kind of learned it from my parents, but I know that's not the case for a lot of people. What resources did you find most helpful in budgeting?
So honestly, Ben, I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little old school and I like to write everything down. I have a
Nice.
calendar and that's how
Yeah.
I take there's apps out there, there's other things that other tools that you can use if you're somebody that does a lot of online banking. You a lot of times you can do it through your online banking app. They will keep track of due dates and deadlines
Okay.
and stuff like that for you as well.
Yeah, automatic is good. I love what you said a second ago. Like, have a category for fun money. If you don't have fun with your money, like your no budget will stick, right? Like I've tried, and I know many people have tried, like Dave Ramsey style envelope systems, where you're like, well, I have no money in this envelope, so I can't do anything. But yet you're miserable, and like you just need some Starbucks or
Exactly.
something.
Yeah.
Like so you got to make space in your budget to enjoy your money, or like what is it for?
Right.
Um,
Deprivation is not always the answer, right? Like you want to
yes,
be able to make sure everything's covered, but give yourself a little bit of leeway and, purchasing a small treat for yourself.
100%. And fun fact, apparently my camera just decided it got too hot and shut off. So
Oh,
hopefully we're
I
we're
can't
we're
see
okay.
it.
We're gonna power through. Sorry about that to the audience, though. I'll have to fix that later. So definitely suggest I threw it up on the screen here. If you haven't heard of Ramit Sethi, really, really good guy that talks a lot about like how do you make a budget that you can enjoy as opposed to that feels really restrictive. And if you're looking for good tools, this is one that I love. YNAB, you need a budget. Just kind of helps you walk through figuring out, looking at your money over the past year or two, and like what did you spend money on? Why did you spend it on that? How much it might need to be in the future? Who the heck knows, right? Like I pay a lot of attention to my finances, and I was just sitting down trying to redo my budget, and I was like, how much do I spend on what? So sometimes it's helpful to have a tool that walks you through that.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, hopefully my camera cools off at some point. This is a fun adventure with a new camera. So while we're waiting for my face to come back, which who really needs that anyway? Um, what what was the first thing you were concerned about with your finances other than budgeting and getting a handle on it? Like, what was the thing that jumped out most at you? Was it like credit? Was it savings?
Um, I I think to me it was probably credit. Credit's important as
Mhm.
as an adult in life, right?
Mm.
And so it's a fine line that we walk because you need credit to build credit, but you also don't want to get yourself into a position where you can't pay for everything, right?
Sure.
Like you've potentially recently just got yourself out of. So you don't want to fall back into that. But as soon as you file and as soon as you receive a discharge, just in case people don't know, bankruptcy records are public.
Okay.
Right? So credit companies know when you've been discharged. They know
Oh,
fun things like
interesting.
that. So all of a sudden you have like a million credit card um, flyers and applications and stuff coming in the mail, and it's really easy to just like that one looks good and that one looks good. But you want to be kind of picky and choosy about how you restart your life in that regard.
Wait, so they aren't like concerned about this? Like I filed bankruptcy and they're like, here's a credit card. Like what's that all about?
Not necessarily. Now, are they going to give you the best interest rate? Probably not.
Ah,
But
okay.
no, they're not always so concerned with the fact that you just filed
Yeah.
bankruptcy. They're willing to give you another shot.
Gotcha. So I know a lot of people talk about like first things to do when you're like trying to rebuild your financial future, right? Like this get out of debt thing one, make a budget thing two. How do you feel about the idea of like getting emergency funds, and how did you go about doing that?
Yeah, so we were lucky enough that our journey was a little bit different than some people's because when we filed, we actually left the home and we decided that if we were going to get a fresh start, we were going to really do it up. And we took our family and we moved across the country. So at the same time, we were getting new jobs and various things at the same time. And so for us, we were fortunate in the fact that our income went up and we were able to set money aside for savings. But the budgeting is going to help for anyone that potentially couldn't do that, with income, and just making sure that you're setting monies aside here and there, and you do have a little bit of an emergency fund.
Can I ask why did you decide to move? What was that all about? Was this like get away from old habits? Like what was going on there?
So, like I mentioned, our home was, we were sinkhole because we
fair,
lived in
fair point.
Florida.
But I guess like you didn't have to move across the country.
No, we actually, it's funny because neither my husband nor I were originally from Florida.
Sure.
And we had always talked about like moving back north and
Mhm.
getting out of Florida. And it kind of all ended up happening at the same time when our kids were a good age that we felt
Okay.
like we could move and it was going to be okay. So
Gotcha.
it was a family decision on top of,
Yeah.
a fresh start.
Yeah, fair enough. I definitely know, like, some people that have filed that are like, I have a friend actually who has a lot of friends that like to spend a lot of money, and so he, in filing, was like, "I gotta get into, like, a different group. I need to be around different people. I can't afford this lifestyle," and so I was curious if it was something like that. Sounds like it was just, smart financial planning on your part.
It was mostly a family decision, but that's an excellent, like, to recognize that, right? Like,
Yeah,
maybe I should put myself in a different environment. That's a great thing to do.
definitely. Alright, so you talked about credit cards a little bit. You're getting credit card offers. You might not be great credit card offers. How do you think about, or how did you think about credit card and, like, rebuilding credit? Because there's a lot of, like, I don't know, I feel like there's a lot of, especially if you think about somebody like Dave Ramsey, who says, like, "Oh, you should not have credit cards for anything, like, run for the hills." Like, how did you think about your credit and, like, rebuilding your credit wisely post-bankruptcy?
Yeah, so, I mean, I personally felt like, um, again, you have to build credit you have to have credit to build credit. So
Sure.
I felt like credit cards were, um, not terrible.
Okay.
We did go about getting secured cards to begin with, right?
Okay,
So
got it.
we went and did, 1 or 2 secured cards. A secured credit card would be, you're putting the deposit down, which would equal the credit limit. So it's reporting to your credit report and, it's working in your favor, but at the same time, you're not gonna go overboard because it's the money that you put down that is your limit.
Got it. So find a card that, you can't just blow out and, like, have $40,000 of debt on again all of a sudden. Where did you get the money for the secured credit card? I know, like, some people don't have any money post bankruptcy. Was this something that you just happened to have that was easy? Did you have to save up for a little while?
So I think that, overall, people would be surprised,
Mm,
if you have regular income coming in. If you hadn't just recently lost your job or something like that
yeah,
when you filed bankruptcy, if you have regular income coming in and you're no longer owing these other debts, you may actually have a little bit more money in your pocket after you file than you think you're going to.
mm,
So like I said, we were able to, find new jobs and we had a little bit higher income and we happened to have a little bit of money to do
mhm.
that. So we did 2 secured credit cards and then when we started we like purchased fuel for a week with them and then paid them
Oh,
off and
interesting.
purchased
Okay,
fuel and paid them off and just used them for certain
for
things
certain things. Okay, that's
to
smart.
make sure that the amount of money we were putting on them was manageable, and it was something that we would have paid for out of our pocket
Sure.
anyways, but we were gonna pay it off through the credit card.
No, that's a great way of thinking of it. Did you ever do that with, like, credit card promos or anything? As you started getting these offers saying, like, spend $1,000, get $100 or anything like that?
Yes, and then, again, I'm not gonna say that I'm a budgeting expert here,
Mhm.
but then, you get the promos where you can, transfer a balance for 0% interest for X period of time, so you're gonna potentially take a card you already have, you're going to transfer the balance to a new card, you're going to
Sure.
get 0% and you're going to pay it off. And if you're getting a lot of mail, so you have to read the mail and make sure that you choose the correct cards to do that. But that's another way to do it.
So make your payments on time, use secured cards, look at the offers that you can get, see how to use them to your advantage. Don't use them to pay for things that you wouldn't have paid for with cash anyway. We're already planning to pay for with cash because we would all pay for stuff with cash if we could. Uh,
Right, right.
any other tips that really, like, worked and helped you out when you're trying to rebuild your credit finances post bankruptcy?
Um, so I still to this day I keep like a snapshot of things that are coming up. I mean,
Mm,
I write out things for a month or a week at a time, and this includes upcoming like child expenses that I know
oh,
about, right? So
okay.
my son is going to start soccer in a few months, and I know that when he starts the soccer, we're going to have to buy a uniform, and I know that the uniform is going to cost approximately this much. So I'm going to balance that budget now. I'm going to put that in my forecast so I know
Yeah.
that that's upcoming. So I don't have any of, I mean, obviously people have expenses that they don't know
Sure.
that they're going to just, unexpected, but I try to forecast and budget as much as I can.
Do you keep like some sort of buffer in there? Because you're like, to your point, stuff comes up. Like, do you have like a just in case portion of your budget?
I mean, you always try to, of course you
Yeah,
do. Of course you try to have that, but the reality is sometimes it's um, smaller than I may want it to be at other
sure.
times.
Yeah. So I know one thing you and I have talked about before, and I've been thinking about this a lot because, as you know, I just had my first baby. Your whole world changes. You're like, oh my God, like, how do I take care of this person with my finances instead of just me? And your kids are a little older. How old are your kids?
So my son is 19 and my daughter is going to be 18 in a month.
Okay, so that is the age. I mean, I'm thinking about how to teach my kid about money now, and he's 6 months old. Yours are definitely at like prime, let's learn about money age. How do you talk to them about these things?
Yeah, so this conversation started actually a little bit a few years ago.
Okay.
So they both started working at 14.
Oh, wow.
So once
Okay.
they started working in their own paychecks, you open up a bank account and
Sure.
you start talking to them about, you get this thing called a debit card, but when you use the card, the money's going to come out of your account.
What?
So you start the conversation real small, like if you're
Yeah.
going to spend $10 on this, to make sure that you know that it's coming
Yeah.
out.
You have $10. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And this is different than like when I had my first job. I mean, you just went cash a check and you had cash. We didn't have bank accounts and debit cards and,
Mm,
all that. Um, not as a teenager, I didn't.
mm,
So, you start the conversation with making sure you have as much as you're gonna spend. Um, once they both turned 18, they got credit card offers in the mail too. And then you start the conversation with, what's a good offer? What's a bad offer? Do you need this? If you're gonna get this, if you're gonna choose to start this credit and open this credit card, make sure that you're going to spend it on things that you're going to pay for anyways. Let's start with fuel. Let's start with
mm.
some
Okay.
groceries. And these are things that you were going to pay for anyways and pay it off. Um, we had this conversation to an extent with my son when we decided what college he was going to go to. He was very specific in what programming he wanted, and
Mm,
we had a few different options of schools that offered that study of program. And he could have gone out of state, he could have gone a few hours away, or he could go 25 minutes down the road and save the housing expense. And so we kind of weighed our pros and cons on how much is this going to cost you here
sure.
versus this one versus that one.
Yeah.
And the programs are essentially the same. So where does it make sense for us?
Hmm. What did he choose? You have a suspense.
So he's commuting. Yes, he chose
Wow.
the
All right.
program 25 minutes down the road, and he
Nice.
stays at home and he saves that money. And he costs me a lot in groceries, but he's not spending that money himself.
Yeah.
So
Well, a lot in groceries is still a lot less than the meal plans at a standard. They're insane. It's like, what is it, like $12,000 a year or something? It's nuts.
yes, I mean there are schools actually. Fun fact, that's something you should look into because there are schools that still require it with a commuter student.
What?
Yeah, it's sometimes you have to work through things, but they
Man,
could
these schools.
require a lower tier,
Huh.
even with a commuter student. So it's something to ask.
These schools, man, always trying to make a buck. Well, good for you for being able to have this conversation with your kids and also for it landing. That's really cool. It's
Well,
impressive.
50% of the battle's done. One down, one to go.
Wait, 50% of whatever it would have cost you otherwise, even if it goes the wrong way, is still a win. That's
Right.
really great. Well, definitely cool. I'm inspired hearing you talk to your kids about this. My kid right now, I talked to him about money and he just looks at me and spits up a little bit. So I'm
Oh,
hoping.
that look is cute though. You know it
Oh
is.
my god, it is. He doesn't ever get to be on YouTube, sadly, because I just want to show him to the world. But it's not his prerogative. So I probably should wait and not put him in a position he's going to be embarrassed about when he gets to high school. All right. Well, we have just been having a grand old time with ourselves talking. The goal of these webinars is to do Q&A. So I want to open the floor to people to ask questions. You can put your questions in the chat. I'm going to drop some questions that I've gotten from elsewhere in the chat. So if you see a bunch of comments and answers coming from me, that's what it is, just so we can get them to show up on screen. Okay, so first question, how long does bankruptcy stay on my credit report? And this is an interesting question to answer as relates to housing, especially. So, how long does it stay on your credit report generally, and how long does it matter for, say, a home loan?
Yep. So Chapter 7 is going to stay on for about 10 years. That's just what it's going to stay on your credit report. But your score is going to go up much sooner than that. And most lenders are going to work with you to buy a house within 2 to 3 years,
Okay,
as long as you've rebuilt your credit, enough. Yeah.
okay,
We were able to purchase another home within 3 years. So
that's amazing. Did you have to get like a
definitely
special kind of
doable.
loan or just regular loan?
We had a regular loan, yep, just, didn't have any other, special, circumstances or anything like that, so,
Hmm,
yeah, we were able to mortgage a home, 3 years after filing.
very cool. Yeah, I got mine a little bit later. The cool thing with mine is my bankruptcy didn't affect my rate at all at around 7 years. That was the cutoff that lending agency. And in like 4 months, it's just gone for my record, which is going to be awesome. I'm looking forward to the chance of finally being able to get those like ultra high rate credit cards that get me into airport lounges and stuff. So we're
Airport lounges, those are the goals.
they're the best. Yeah, that's I feel like that's the financial that's my version of Ramit Sethi's like I'll teach you to be rich is like not having to sit down in the COVID pit at the airport. Uh, so, will bankruptcy erase all of my debts or just some of them? It's a good question.
Yes, so, most unsecured debts are dischargeable.
Mhm.
Some student loans, depending on the types, and some taxes
Okay,
will remain and are not dischargeable.
gotcha. This is a good one. This is a big worry that I had, and I actually was just talking to somebody about this recently, especially important for people that drive Uber or Lyft for a living. And that is, can I keep my car if I file bankruptcy? And I put the answer accidentally in the message. So we're going to hide that and not, not spoil your surprise. So, can I keep my car if I file bankruptcy?
So in most instances, yes. Yes, you can. The bankruptcy courts and the trustees are not out to, take your vehicles and make sure most people need, a way to get to work or to and from or have children or various things. So, yeah, in most instances, you can keep your vehicle.
Okay. So, what's the best way to start saving money after bankruptcy? Do I just do it immediately? Do I do it for some specific goal? What advice do you have about saving money after bankruptcy?
So oftentimes it's just easier to start small, work
Mm,
gradual, maybe call it an emergency fund to begin with, because in
mm,
your brain, then you say, I'm not going to use it. You may not want to have, "Oh, I'm going to buy a hot tub, or you may not want to have that in mind right away. You might want to
yeah.
start small, call it an emergency. That means you're less likely to use it.
Okay. Got it. So, have some small goals. How do you go about calculating an emergency fund? Like, if that is something that you care about, like kind of having a buffer, what do you think you should save for? Like, how much would you save?
I think I read somewhere that it should be like 10% of your monthly income or something. I don't know how realistic that is. Um, I feel like you should look at your income, look at your expenses, and see what you can work with, right?
Okay. Interesting.
Um,
So basically what you can afford, like I
I think so. I think to begin with, you start small, right?
okay. Yeah, I've heard people say like 3 to 6 months, but that's so much, right? Like, I've also heard people say like just save $1,000 because you kind of just get some progress and play, but do what you can. It's amazing how much better you feel having, I don't know, $500 in the bank as opposed to having no dollars in the bank because,
Exactly.
that's puts a buffer if you have some sort of medical issue happen or if you need to pay for something you didn't expect. So just get what you can. Um, this is an interesting one for you. So you guys moved right after bankruptcy, or pretty close to after. So were you able to rent, or did you need to rent after you filed bankruptcy?
Yes, we were able to rent. It depends on where you go. Most landlords may may do a credit check, may not. It kind of
Mm,
depends your area, like various things like that.
mhm.
But for the most part, you're able to. They if they do a credit check, they may require a little bit higher deposit, but it depends on the area you're in.
Okay. So did you have to do that?
I did not. So
Okay.
we moved to a really small town in New York State, and our
Nice.
landlord was like a family that we knew. So
Okay. Well, that
we did
definitely
not.
makes it easier. So if somebody is dealing with that, right? Like the credit was tanking, they filed bankruptcy, went down a little bit more. What should they do? Like, how do they get their credit to the point that they can get an apartment? And like, what does that process look like?
To rebuild their credit.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a huge proponent of the secured credit
Mhm.
cards. If that's something that you can swing, is even $200. Even a $200 secured credit card is going to put positive credit back on your report, and it's not something that you can go too crazy with.
Mm,
So
okay. Gotcha. So get those secured credit cards. I don't know if you did anything with like rent reporting or like getting like a credit builder loan or any disputes or anything like that. Was that part of your rebuilding strategy or no?
I did not, but I
Okay.
did go about, there are certain regular bills that you can
Mhm.
request to be put on your credit report,
Oh,
right?
cool.
So if you have your cell phone and you pay your cell phone bill monthly because
Mhm.
these days your cell phone is a necessity.
Yeah.
So, most people
Yeah.
pay it, they have to have it. So you can request that that reports to your credit report. That's not something that automatically
Oh,
happens. You can
okay.
also report like your utilities. You're going to pay electric or gas, or
Mhm.
depending on where you live in the country, you can ask for those to report to your credit as
Cool.
well. And so those are positive payments that are going to show up on your credit report monthly.
How do you do that?
So you can either reach out to the company itself, but I think that if you go to the credit reports, if you go to the three bureaus, I think you can do it online. There's a way that you can add a creditor to your report right online and do it that way too.
Okay. Gotcha. Well, we're definitely going to be like calling and emailing you to figure this out because I actually didn't even know you could report utility bills. That's really cool. I've only
You
heard.
definitely can,
That's
yes.
awesome. I've most of the people that I've talked to, it's like rent reporting is the thing because you have this large payment on a regular basis that you can report, and you can do it retroactively too, which really helps boost your credit quickly. So obviously, if you're thinking about rebuilding finances post bankruptcy, you're thinking about credit, you're thinking about savings. Was immediately thinking about, okay, now what can I actually start to do in terms of like investments, saving for retirement, all that kind of stuff? Because I'm a weirdo. I'm sure there are other people out there thinking that too. And the first question that pops up for me thinking about retirement savings is like, well, what if I had retirement savings and I filed bankruptcy? Is it gone? Do I have to start from zero? What happens?
So it honestly depends on the state that you're filing in,
Okay,
but most states offer exemptions to cover retirement accounts and
very
various
cool.
things like that. Yes.
What for those that don't know, what is an exemption?
So an exemption is a law or rule that will allow certain things to be held out of
Okay.
your bankruptcy filing. So it kind of safeguards
Mhm.
certain things for you, or up to a certain amount of various things for you. So that would be household goods, retirement plans, things like that can be safeguarded depending on your state and your exemptions.
Okay, got it. Now, I know you mentioned earlier, you and your husband were both self-employed. Did you file your bankruptcy together? Did you file independently? How did that work?
Yep. So we filed together.
Mhm.
He was self-employed. Was. I had a regular, W
Okay,
two
got it. I missed
employment.
that.
But we did file together. We filed joint and we filed Chapter 7.
Okay, got it. So had that not been the case, like I know some couples file individually, Upsolve only works with people that are not trying to file with their spouse. What happens if you have a cosigner? Like what happens if your spouse was a cosigner on some loan?
Yes. So if a cosigner files for bankruptcy on something,
Mhm,
it does not necessarily affect the loan.
mhm.
Typically, the other person in the debt can keep it. Um,
Keep the loan at
Keep the
post-bankruptcy.
loan,
Got it.
yes. It depends on what it is, it depends on what you've co-signed on. Most times with vehicles,
Mhm,
the other person can
mhm.
keep that.
Gotcha. So what about lawsuits? I know a lot of people that come to Upsolve find us because they're dealing with the debt lawsuit. They're being sued, being threatened with a lawsuit. What happens to the lawsuit? Is it gone post-bankruptcy?
Um, so it kinda depends on what the lawsuit is.
Mhm,
For most cases, the answer would be yes.
mhm.
It depends on what it is, though.
Okay.
And when you file bankruptcy, you get the automatic stay, right? So
What is that?
that's yeah, the automatic
What
stay.
a
So
dumb word, stay. Like,
a
what's that even
stay.
mean?
Stay away. No,
Stay
it's
away
a
from
stay, and
bankruptcy.
it's an automatic stay that comes in, as soon as you file, and that
Okay.
happens as soon as you get a case number once you go to file for court, right? Then that
Hmm,
stay is automatically in place. And that means that certain creditors and, they can't contact you anymore, right? They're not
okay.
supposed to call you, they're not supposed to pursue certain debts and various things, and it can halt
Mhm,
those lawsuits. Doesn't mean that depending on what it is, it's gonna go away entirely,
mhm,
but it will halt it for the time being while
mm,
you
okay.
proceed through your bankruptcy
So
filing.
you get a little bit of relief from it.
You
Like,
can get some gr
lawsuits are
yep.
scary. Like, I've been in a couple of them, and it's just like, what is going on half the time? Like, you get things in the mail, like, you gotta go to court, but when? I don't know. So that's a big plus for bankruptcy if it stops most collection lawsuits.
Yes, and for wage garnishment in particular, it will halt that for
Mm,
the time being. Again, it's not necessarily gonna erase in the end everything, but for
okay,
most things, it will.
gotcha. Well, this is all super helpful. Love hearing your insights on rebuilding. And I learned some things I didn't even know. So look at this. So, last question for you. What is the biggest misconception about bankruptcy and its effect on your financial health?
Um, Bankruptcy is it's scary. It's a scary word to some people. People feel it means like it's financial ruin.
Mm,
That you can't come back from it
mm,
or that it takes so long to come back from, and that's not really the case.
mm,
People you get a fresh start and many, many times people are able to come back stronger, better credit, better footing, better foundation. The reality is many people file for bankruptcy because of things that happened to them that were out of their control.
mm.
And, so once you're able to get a fresh start and kind of relieve yourself of some of those bad debts, most people bounce back even better. It doesn't take nearly as long as people think it will.
That's awesome. So, what is one piece of advice you want to give to somebody who just filed bankruptcy and is nervous about their future?
That's a great question. I would say that if you just filed, um, you should really, focus on your fresh start.
Mm,
This is a chance to rebuild. It's
mm,
not just because you file a bankruptcy, it's not a life sentence forever. It can be
mm,
daunting. It can be scary. Focus on a budget. Focus on keeping your expenses into something that you can afford,
mm,
and it's not going to take as long as you think.
mm. I love that. Not going to take as long as you think. I mean, you got a mortgage 2, 3 years after. That's the American dream right there. And this after a sinkhole. Holy cow.
Don't get me started on the sinkhole. That's a whole different. That's a whole different show.
Yeah. We'll end the webinar in a sinkhole. That's definitely the best, most enlightening spot. So, Melissa, if folks want to connect with you or learn more, what's the best way for them to do both of those things?
Yep, so they can definitely visit upsolve.org and to reach out to me or the support team. We can be reached at help@upsolve.org. Um, if you have questions, if you have questions about bankruptcy, the process, anything, you can shoot us a message and we're fairly timely. No, we're very timely in responding and pointing you in the right direction, giving you any sort of insight that we have, and just helping you determine if bankruptcy is the best option for you.
Amazing. So, and actually, great way to get help is if you start the Upsolve bankruptcy tool. If that's something you're considering, you can be talking to Melissa through there in, I don't know, as soon as like 45 minutes. So, if you're considering it, jump on in. It will help you understand if it's the right thing and it'll give you advice if it seems to not be for you. So with that, we're well over time. Melissa, thank you for your long-suffering patience and contributions in here. Really appreciate all the advice you gave. And thanks to everybody for joining us tonight. If you found this webinar helpful, be sure to check out our other resources on YouTube and on our website. We have lots of past webinars with experts on debt relief topics, so check those out. We also have many other episodes, or many other shows, rather, on our YouTube, exploring things from rebuilding credit post-bankruptcy to how do I even choose the right option, or what even is bankruptcy? So if you've got an answer, there's likely an answer in that content. If you do want to ask questions after this, if something surfaces, we do respond to comments, so drop them down below. We would be happy to look through those and answer those in the chat, or maybe even bring those questions into future webinars. So as I said, thanks for your time tonight, everybody. Really, really want to leave you with Melissa's encouragement that it's not as hard as it seems like it is, and you'll get back on your feet a lot more quickly than you think you will. Have a great rest of your evening, and we'll see you soon next Monday for another webinar. Take care.